What if I told you there is a state in South America with an economy larger than Argentina's, bigger than all of Chile, and more powerful than Portugal's? And what if I told you this state isn't a country? It's São Paulo. And at its heart is a city, a sprawling concrete megacity whose own local economy dwarfs that of entire neighboring nations. This is a place without world-famous beaches, without ancient ruins, without the postcard clichés that define our image of Brazil. It is a sea of skyscrapers, a relentless urban machine that for most of the world is completely invisible. So how did this happen? How did a landlocked plateau, 1,000 meters above the sea, become the undisputed economic heart of an entire continent? The story of São Paulo is the story of a different kind of Brazil. It's a story of renegades, of black gold, and of a relentless ambition that was forged not by looking out at the ocean, but by turning its back on it and waging a war against the continent itself. This is the story of the engine that powers Brazil. To understand São Paulo, you have to go back to a group of men who defined its soul. They were the Bandeirantes. In the 16th and 17th centuries, while most of colonial Brazil was a collection of sleepy coastal towns focused on shipping sugar to Europe, the early settlement of São Paulo was different. It was poor, isolated, and perched on a plateau, cut off from the coast by a steep mountain range. The men here weren't plantation owners. They were something new. A mix of Portuguese adventurers, indigenous peoples, and their mixed-race descendants. They were tough, rugged, and driven. These were the Bandeirantes, the flag bearers. They organized huge expeditions, or bandeiras, that pushed deep into the unknown interior of South America, a territory that was supposedly Spanish by treaty. They weren't building quaint towns. They were waging a war against the wilderness itself. For decades, they hunted for gold and precious stones, but their most profitable and brutal trade was in human lives. They were slave hunters, raiding indigenous missions and villages, capturing tens of thousands to be sold to the sugar plantations back on the coast. Their methods were undeniably cruel, a dark stain on the nation's history. Yet in this brutality was a pinch of something that would define the Paulista identity. They were relentless survivors and expansionists. While the rest of Brazil faced the sea, the Bandeirantes faced the continent. They were self-reliant, forging their own path, and in doing so, they redrew the map of Brazil, pushing its borders hundreds of kilometers west. They were the anti-colonial colonists, explorers who, through sheer grit and ambition, gave São Paulo its foundational identity. A place that doesn't wait to be led, but leads. A place that doesn't look outward for its fortune, but carves it from the land itself. For centuries, that fortune remained elusive, until they discovered a different kind of gold. Black gold. In the 19th century, the world developed an insatiable thirst for coffee, and it turned out that the interior of São Paulo state had the perfect conditions to quench it. A deep, incredibly fertile, reddish-purple soil called terra roxa, or purple earth. This soil was the remnant of ancient volcanic activity, and it was the perfect medium for growing coffee. This was the moment São Paulo's destiny was unlocked. The state became the world's coffee pot. The wealth that erupted from this red earth was staggering. Coffee barons, flush with cash, became the new aristocracy of Brazil. They built lavish mansions in the city of São Paulo and funded the construction of massive railways that snaked from the deep interior of the state to the port of Santos, creating a logistical superhighway for their product. But they needed labor, millions of hands to work the endless coffee plantations. With slavery finally abolished, they looked overseas. What followed was one of the largest waves of migration in modern history. From the 1880s onward, millions of immigrants poured into São Paulo. The largest group came from Italy, poor tenant farmers seeking a new life. But many also came from Portugal, Spain, Germany, and the Middle East. And in 1908, The first ship of Japanese immigrants arrived, the beginning of a migration that would eventually create the largest Japanese community outside of Japan, right here in São Paulo. This colossal influx of people transformed São Paulo. It became a crucible of cultures, a place defined not by a single colonial heritage, but by a mosaic of global identities. These immigrants brought with them their food, their languages, and most importantly, an entrepreneurial spirit and a ferocious work ethic. They were the fuel for the engine room. The state of São Paulo was now a global agricultural superpower, and the city of São Paulo was its booming control center, a place where fortunes were made and a new multicultural society was being forged in the heat of the coffee boom. The coffee boom made São Paulo rich, but what made it a powerhouse was what it did next. As coffee prices became more volatile in the early 20th century, the astute Paulista elite didn't just sit on their agricultural wealth. They reinvested it. They used the capital, the infrastructure, and the immigrant labor force built by coffee to do something revolutionary in Brazil: industrialize. This is when the famous saying was born: São Paulo is the locomotive, and the 26 other states are the wagons it pulls. The state's economy diversified at a breathtaking pace. Factories producing textiles, cars, and consumer goods sprang up around the capital. The city of São Paulo became the undisputed industrial and financial heart of the nation. Its official motto, written on its coat of arms, perfectly captures this spirit. Non ducor, duco. I'm not led, I lead. The city's skyline began to reflect this identity. It grew upwards. While Rio de Janeiro had its picturesque beaches and mountains, São Paulo had skyscrapers, a sea of concrete and glass towers that stretched to the horizon, a testament to its relentless ambition. Avenida Paulista, once a street lined with the mansions of coffee barons, transformed into the financial artery of the continent, home to the headquarters of some of Brazil's biggest banks and corporations. São Paulo didn't have the natural beauty of Rio. Its beauty was man-made. It was the awe-inspiring spectacle of a city that never stops working, a place where fortunes are still forged, not from the earth, but from industry, finance, and sheer, relentless human energy. Today, the state of São Paulo is an economic nation unto itself, responsible for over a third of Brazil's entire GDP. The city is a true global megacity, the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, with more than 22 million people in its metropolitan area. It is the center of everything in Brazil, from finance and technology to high fashion and world-class cuisine. Its cultural life is a direct product of its immigrant past, from the vibrant Italian neighborhood of Bexiga to the bustling streets of Liberdade, the Japanese Quarter. But this relentless growth has come at a cost. São Paulo is a city of brutal paradoxes. Helicopters, a common mode of transport for the super-rich, fly over sprawling favelas or slums that cling to the city's edges. The city's wealth is immense, but so is its inequality. The traffic can be soul-crushing, the pollution a constant haze, and the sheer scale of the concrete jungle can feel overwhelming, even dehumanizing. It is a city of extremes. The best of Brazil and the worst of Brazil often exist on the very same block. The people of São Paulo, known as Paulistanos, are famous throughout Brazil for their distinct, work-focused culture. They have a reputation for being perpetually in a hurry, for talking business, for living in a city that is more a place to work than a place to live. And yet, beneath the surface of this relentless machine is a vibrant, creative, and surprisingly diverse human experience. It is a city that demands your energy, but also rewards it. It is not an easy place to love, but for millions, it is an impossible place to leave. So, what is São Paulo? It is far more than just another big city. It is the product of a unique history, a renegade spirit forged by the Bandeirantes, funded by the black gold of coffee, built by the hands of immigrants from every corner of the globe and cemented by a relentless drive to lead. It is a country within a country, an economic engine whose roar is so loud it often drowns out the Brazil of samba and beaches that the world thinks it knows. São Paulo challenges our perception of what Brazil is. It's the story of how a place with none of the typical colonial advantages, a landlocked city on a plateau, could, through sheer human will, ambition, and a bit of brutality, become the most powerful economic force on a continent. It is the relentless, often unforgiving engine that powers the beautiful Brazil we see on postcards. It is not the Brazil of your imagination. It is the Brazil that builds it,